Hey there everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of 3B TV. I'm Brian, this is 3B Farm and Homestead in beautiful upstate New York. And on this episode of 3B TV, I want to talk to you about sprouting grain to feed to your livestock. Now, in my situation, I'm using this to feed my American Guinea Hogs, which are a heritage breed of pig. I'm also taking what's left over and I'm using it to supplement my chicken feed. This isn't their sole ration. I just use it as kind of a scratch that I throw on the ground and give them something to kind of scratch around at. You could use this as a chicken ration. I think you could use this to feed to other kinds of animals as well. But my experience has been with using this to feed it to American Guinea Hogs. This is a system that Jack Rowland, who's the vice president of the American Guinea Hog Association, he kind of taught me this, and I've been tweaking it to kind of fit my situation. But that's what I'm doing with it, using it to feed my American Guinea Hogs, although I think you could use this to feed many other kinds of animals as well. So let's first of all start with the supplies you're going to need to set up a sprouting system. The first thing you're going to need are 5-gallon buckets, and really you're going to need 6 of them. You're going to start out with a 3-bucket system. We'll talk to you a little bit about how it all works, but you're going to need 6 5-gallon buckets at least to start. Now, you can find these, you're going to want a food grade. I think a food grade bucket. I don't think you're going to want something that had some kind of chemicals in it, but you're going to want a food grade bucket. You can pick these up for super cheap at Walmart. I think these were like $3. But a really quick tip for you is go to your local supermarket or bakery or Walmart or any of those places and go to the bakery, and frosting comes in 5-gallon buckets very similar to this. They've got those buckets. At least my supermarket is willing to hold them and give them away to customers, so check there with them. But again, these are like $3 at Walmart. I picked up 8 of them. I'm using actually a little bit of a few additional buckets. We'll talk about that in a minute. So start with 6 5-gallon buckets. So the next thing you're going to need are whole grains to sprout. That's what you're going to feed your animals. In my case, I am using oats, winter rye, and wheat because that's what I've been able to find in my area. Jack uses, I think, wheat exclusively. He can get it for a good price where he's at. I've heard of people using black oil sunflower seeds, field peas. You can use barley. Any kind of whole grain that is sproutable will work. You probably could even use corn. I've just chosen not to use it, but you probably could even use whole corn. You want to make sure that the seed, the grain, has not been treated. Sometimes they'll treat grain so it doesn't sprout. You don't want that. You want whole grains that you can sprout. The third thing you're going to need is some of this stuff right here. This is plastic canvas. You can find it at Michael's, you can find it at AC Moore, you can find it at Hobby Lobby, any one of those crafty kind of shops. You can find this stuff very, very cheap, and so you're going to need some of this plastic canvas. So a couple of other things that you're going to need is a fish pump with some aerating blocks and some bleach. That's it. That's all you need to set up your sprouting system. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take 3 of your buckets and you're going to actually cut out holes in the bottom of your buckets. Now I've chosen to do it in a pattern kind of like that. I'm using a fairly good size hole saw. You could just drill holes through it. I did it this way just to make it drain a little bit easier. But 3 of your buckets, you're going to want to cut holes in the bottom of them. So then you're going to take your plastic canvas, you're going to trace around it with the bottom of the bucket, cut it out, and then it should fit right in the bottom of the bucket very nicely, just like that. So that's really all you need to do for your setup. I've taken a piece of plywood, I've got it over here on the wall, I've got my fish pump hooked up to it. You'll have your bleach close by. You might want to also get something like this. This is just one of those fish nets to kind of skim some of the floaties off, but I don't always use that, but you might want to have that on hand as well. That's it. Now you're ready to go. So now you've cut the holes in the bottom of the bucket. You've got your plastic canvas cut to the right size. ready to drop in there. You have an aerator ready to go. It's mounted nearby. Now you're ready to start your sprouting. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take your bucket with the holes in the bottom of it. You're going to want to drop it into a bucket with no holes in the bottom of it. You're going to want to measure into this a portion of grain. If you're just getting started with this, I would recommend maybe putting in a scoop or two of grain. Don't get too crazy. A couple of quarts of grain just to get started so you get a feel for how the system works. You're going to go ahead and put that in here. You're going to cover it with water, maybe 2, 3, 4 inches over the top of the grain. You're going to want to take and put a cap full of bleach into this first bucket. That'll help cut down on the mold spores. And then you're going to want to take and drop your aerators into this bucket and let it set for 12 hours. After 12 hours, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pick up on it. So you're going to pick right up on this bucket, pull it out. It's going to drain out the bottom. Once it's drained, you're going to want to move it over to bucket number 2 that has no holes in the bottom of it. You're going to let it set for 12 hours, draining, and you're going to go ahead and take another bucket with holes in the bottom of it, put it into bucket number 1 that has no holes, and you're going to fill it with grain, fill it with water, put your bleach in, put your aerators in it, and you're going to let it soak for 12 hours. The other thing is, you're going to want to take, once you've drained this, you're going to take the water that was left that you've drained out of it, and you're going to want to dispose of it. I use it to water my pigs, but you may not feel comfortable doing that. You know, dump it, put it on your flowers, put it on your garden, whatever you want, but you're going to want to dispose of that. You've got bucket number 2 that's been draining for 12 hours. Bucket number 1 has been soaking with the aerator for 12 hours. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take and cover this bucket with water for about 45 minutes, an hour, however long it takes you to do your chores. This is just really an opportunity for you to rehydrate these grains one more time. So you're going to take this bucket, you're going to fill it with water, you're going to make sure that the grain is covered, leave it for about 45 minutes, an hour. When you come back, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to pull up on it, move it over to bucket number 3, dispose of this water. You're going to take this bucket that's been soaking for 12 hours, move it over to bucket number 2. You're going to dispose of this water, and you're going to take your third bucket that has the holes in the bottom of it. You're going to take that, put it back into bucket number 1, put your grain in, put your water in, put your bleach in, and you're going to let it soak for 12 hours with the aerator. This one is now sitting here for 12 hours draining. This one is now sitting here for 12 hours draining. After those 12 hours are passed, you're going to take this bucket and you're going to harvest it. You're going to feed it to your animals. While you're feeding this to your animals, you're going to take this bucket, fill it with water, let it soak. Once you're done feeding your animals, you're going to take this bucket, pull it out. Again, you're going to move it over to bucket number 3. You're going to take bucket number 1, you're going to drain it, move it over to bucket number 2, and now you're going to take your recently emptied bucket, put grain in it, put it into slot number 1, fill it with water, and repeat the process. So what's happening is you're just taking these buckets and you're moving them through the system every 12 hours. So when you feed your animals in the morning, you do it. When you feed your animals at night, you do it. Don't get so caught up about it has to be exactly 12 hours or it has to be exactly an hour. That's just rough guidelines. I feed my animals in the morning at 6 o'clock. In the afternoon, I feed them between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. That's when I do this. I don't get too hung up on has to be exactly 12 hours. This has to be exactly an hour. No, it's just a matter of systematically doing it. Approximately 12 hours, approximately, in my case, sometimes it's a half hour or less. Depends on how long it takes me to do my chores. That's how long this bucket soaks, and it keeps moving on through the system. So that's how a 3-bucket system works for sprouting. Now, I'm actually using 5 buckets. I have 2 additional buckets here. I allow mine to go another 24 hours for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm using oats, and oats do take a longer time to sprout. And you'll find, depending on the grain that you're using, certain grains sprout more quickly than others. winter rye and wheat seem to sprout a lot quicker for me than my oats do. And so that's one consideration. Another consideration is ambient temperature. The warmer it is, the better off the system is going to work. Now, you want it somewhere in the 70 to 80 degree range, I would say, maybe 65 to 75 degrees. If it gets too warm, then at that point you're probably going to start seeing an issue with mold. But as long as you're using the bleach in the first bucket, and if you see any kind of floaties and whatnot, you can use your skimmer to skim those off. That'll help cut down on the mold. But other than that, I have not really had a problem with mold since I've been doing this. I've just gone to the 5 bucket system because I'm in an unheated basement, and because I'm using oats, it takes a little bit longer for it to sprout than it would if it was a little warmer, or if I was using just winter rye, for example. So just keep that in mind. Just play with it, figure out what works for you. That's why I recommend that if you're starting a system, don't go hog wild with a bunch of grain. Do a couple of scoopfuls, work it through, see how it works, and then kind of go on from there. Another thing to keep in mind is I'm not a nutritionalist. Okay, this is what I've been doing. It's worked well for me, but this is a your mileage may vary kind of thing. So play around, see what works for you. The American Guinea Hog is known as a lard hog, and so you don't free feed it like you would some of the other breeds of pigs. That's why this system works so well for me, because I want to limit their food intake. I want to make sure that I'm giving them what I want them to have. And then I also balance it out with giving them free choice for hay, any vegetable scraps. I'll throw in weeds that I picked out of the garden. Anything like that. I was able to get some pumpkins in the fall. Excess vegetables from the garden are going in there. So, table scraps. I'm feeding them a lot of different things. I've gotten some stale bread and been able to feed that to them. But predominantly, this is their main ration. And I've been very happy with it. So another thing to keep in mind is that this is not a fully balanced ration for a pig. There are minerals that a pig needs for proper development that they're not necessarily going to get through a sprouted grain system, or even just feeding them hay or things like that. Things like psyllium and lysine and a few other trace minerals and so on and so forth. Now, so what I've chosen to do is supplement with a hog feed that I get from a local feed mill to give them those nutrients, those minerals, and so on and so forth. I'm going to be changing that up a little bit. I just picked up a bag of NutriBalancer from Fertrell. It's a swine mineral mix that I'm going to be adding into my ration each day to try to give them that balance. And I think I'm going to move away from using the corn and soy based feed that I've used up to this point. But just keep that in mind. So I want to close out just by answering a couple of quick questions with regards to this system. First of all, how is this different from a fodder system, and why do this versus a fodder system? Well, this is different from a fodder system in that you are harvesting the grain far earlier than you would in a fodder system. In a fodder system, you're usually going about 7 to 10 days, growing it out to almost a blade of grass, so to speak. Here you're harvesting it, if you're doing a 3 bucket system, you're harvesting it at what, 36 hours? If my math is correct, I think 36 hours. So you're a lot earlier in this system than you are in a fodder system, which has a lot of benefits because you're doing it a lot more quickly. You're not going to have as much of a problem as you would with a fodder system with mold. And that's one of the issues that I had when I was trying to do fodder for my chickens and my rabbits. I would get to about day 5 and I just had all kinds of mold problems. And it didn't seem to matter how much bleach I used, I still had mold. And it was very, very frustrating for me. The second thing is that, at least in my instance, there's no need to grow it out to grass size. When I was doing that with fodder and I was throwing it to my chickens were eating the seed. They were wasting the sprout. they weren't interested in the green stuff. That's why I was doing it. I wanted them to have the green stuff. I was hoping that it would help in the winter months to give them some of that, chlorophyll to make those yolks more of that nice orange, color and consistency that we're used to in the spring, summer, and fall. They wanted nothing to do with it. They would eat the grain, and they would waste the rest of it. I've also heard that basically pigs can't really digest the cellulose, so it's a waste for them as well. So harvesting this earlier definitely makes a lot more sense, because the animals are going to use more of the grain itself and not waste the sprouted part of it. You're not going to have to worry about the mold that you sometimes deal with a traditional fodder system. So another question you might ask is, well, why not just feed them the grain straight up? Just feed them the dry grain and be done with it. Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, on every piece of grain, if you can see on the outside of that, is that hard kind of shell, that outer part. And it takes a lot of work for our bodies and the animals' bodies to be able to digest that. And so if you just feed them the grain just straight up dry, you're going to see a lot of grain just passing through their bodies, because their digestive systems will have started to break through that outer piece, break it down, but it's never going to fully get to that inner part where all the nutrients and all of that good stuff is. And so you'll see just a lot of grain just pass right through the animal because of that outer protective covering. So by sprouting this grain, you're softening that up. And so if I go out and I look at my pig's poop, I know that's pleasant, isn't it? If I go out and look at my pig's poop, I don't see a lot of grains in it. Their bodies have really digested it, been able to really get all of those nutrients out of it. Obviously, another thing with regards to this is that the grain is going to go farther. What do I mean by that? Well, if I measure out, and generally speaking, what I'm doing now is I measure out 6 quarts of dry grain. And when I go to feed them, I have between 8 and 9 quarts of sprouted grain. Now, obviously, all of that addition is in water, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially in the case of it being winter months and you wanting your animals to be well hydrated. So this does help to a certain extent, I think, hydrate your animal. But also, you're just getting more bang for your buck. Your feed is going to go a little bit farther because you've sprouted it. And also, you're unleashing a lot of the potential nutrient-wise from the grain when you sprout it. So hopefully you found this helpful on how to sprout grain for your livestock. If you have any questions, comment below. I'll be glad to answer them. If I don't know the answer, I'll make something up. No, I'm just kidding. I'll let you know that. I don't claim to be an expert here. There's plenty of people that are far smarter than me. But I really wanted to kind of show how the sprouting system works, because it seems like again and again and again, this question comes up in especially in the American Guinea Hog Facebook group. And so I really wanted to show people how the system works, because some people it's a little bit hard to just grasp how the system works without actually seeing it in action. So if I was unclear, I'm sorry. If you've got any questions or clarification is needed, comment below. I'll be glad to try to clarify anything. A big shout out and a big thanks to Jack Rowland, who kind of has helped me develop this and helped me tweak this. And if you have any suggestions on ways to make this better, let me know. I'm always interested in ways to make my farm more efficient, more effective, and to give my animals the best life possible, even though I realize that in the end, what I'm doing is I'm raising them for meat. But I want to make sure that I'm doing it in a way that's effective, that's efficient, and that is obviously humane. So any comments, questions, anything at all, comment below. If you found this helpful, please like, share it with your friends. And until next time, guys, I'm Brian. This is my farmstead story, and I'm sticking to it. Catch you later.